Welcome to JSB's YouTube channel. From confusion to clarity, from the examination point of view, I'm discussing a few important points where where the student can study this particular chapter in a smart way and get the maximum marks by putting little effort. The first chapter, exception handling in Python. This chapter includes seven topics, namely introduction, syntax errors, exceptions, built in exceptions, exceptions, handling exceptions, and finally clause. From the examination point of view, this chapter weightage is 5 marks. That includes one question from multiple choice question, one question from fill in the blanks, one question from part C, which is of 3 marks. It's a descriptive part. Now let us study some important topics, nothing but the summary of the chapter 1. The chapter 1 discuss about the various kinds of errors. Mainly, it concentrates on two kinds of error. One is the syntax error, another one is runtime error. Of course, there is a logical error also. The syntax error is also called as a parsing error and is detected when we have not followed the rules of a particular programming language while writing a program. What happens when a syntax error is encountered? The Python displays the name of the error and a small description about the error. The execution of the program will start only after the syntax error is rectified by the programmer. That means it will stop execution of the program in the middle itself. The exception is a Python runtime error that represent an error. Syntax error are also handled as exceptions apart from runtime errors. The exception needs to be handled by the programmer. That means the it is not automatically corrected by the computer. The programmer has to identify the exception so that the program does not terminate abruptly. When an exception occurs during the execution of a program, it is also called as a runtime error, and there is a built-in exception defined for that error. The error message written in that exception is displayed. The programmer then has to take appropriate action to handle it. So, as and when exception occurs, a built-in exception which is defined for that will be shown along with the error message. Then the programmer has to take the appropriate action to handle it. The some of the commonly occurring built-in exceptions in Python are, remember students, there are 12 inbuilt exceptions. All the 12 inbuilt exceptions are very, very important. You have to study each and every inbuilt exception, name, and what is the kind of error it represent. Syntax error, value error, IO error, keyboard interrupt error, exception, import error, end of file error, zero division error, index error, name error, indentation error, type error, and overflow error. These are the 12 inbuilt exceptions. Please study each and every exception completely. What is syntax error? What is a value error when it occurs? What is an IO error? What is a keyboard interrupt error? Everything you have to study with example. There are 12 built-in exceptions. Remember, when an error is encountered in a program, the Python interpreter raises or throws an exception. Remember, an exception represents an error present in the program. The exception handlers are the codes. It is a Python program block that are designed to execute when an specific exception is raised. Raising an exception involves interrupting the normal flow of the program execution and jumping to the exception handler. Whenever there is a problem present in the program in the form of a syntax error or in the runtime error, the raising of an exception involves stopping the normal execution of the program and moving on to the exception handler where the user can take necessary step to overcome that problem. Then only the normal flow will be happen in the Python programming execution phase. The raise and assert statements are used to raise exceptions. Manually, the raise and assert statements are used to raise an exception apart from inbuilt exceptions. The process of exception handling involves writing additional code to give proper messages or instructions to the user. This prevents the program from crashing abruptly. This additional code is known as an exception handler. Underline this. What is an exception handler? Question may come. The answer for exception handler is it is the process of exception handling by writing additional code to give proper message indicating what is the kind of error identified, and this sorry prevents the program from crashing abruptly. An exception is said to be caught. Underline this, caught. The exception is said to be caught when a code that is designed to handle a particular exception is executed. Suppose there is no exception identified for a kind of error, then it is said to be exception is not caught. So any kind of error, if you identify, then it is said to be caught. If you cannot identify what is the error, then that error is not identified, means exception is not caught. If you identify the error, exception is caught. If you do not identify the error, then exception is not caught. You can catch an exception by using inbuilt exception or by creating your own exception using raise statement or using assert statement. An exception is caught in the try block, handled in the except block. Remember, you have to study the try block, except block, else block, and finally block. So the try block, except block, else block, and finally clause are very, very important because it may come for 3 marks. You have to study what is the syntax and also an example for try, except, else. The statements inside the finally block are always executed regardless of whether an exception is occurred or exception is not occurred. In the try block, if there is no error identified, except block will not be executed, it will go to else block. In the try block, if any error is identified, then a proper uh, exception is identified in the exception block. Irrespective of executing the except block or the else block, the finally block are always executed. Now let us see how are the question appear under MCQ. These are the questions that are present in your model question paper. The exception raised when the requested module definition is not found. Now, the choices are given: IO error, syntax error, import error, and index error. You know the answer, that is import error. Now, the given Q is equal to N divided by D, which is a statement where D is equal to 0, variable N value is 50, which built-in exception occurs. So N value is 50, D value is 0. 50 divided by 0 is a which kind of error? Exception. It is a zero division error. The exception raised when a local or global variable is not defined is the options are import error, type error, value error, and the name error. The answer is name error. So, dear students, please, how do we decide the answer under MCQ category? You have to decide the proper answer by eliminating the wrong answer, not by judging the correct answer. Now, what is the purpose of IO error? What is syntax error? What is import error? What is index error? All the four errors, if you know, then only you can eliminate the three wrong answers and conclude with the final correct answer. Now, any questions will be drawn either understanding category or knowledge based category or application based category. Here, I would like to highlight the second question given Q is equal to N divided by D. It is a application category kind of question. This requires lot of knowledge and understanding. Then only one can answer such application kind of questions. So your question paper will be designed by including knowledge questions, application oriented questions, and understanding oriented questions. Ap- Application oriented questions are normally difficult. Now, there are two preparatory question papers released by the department. The two questions are like this: why should exceptions be handled in Python? To ensure that errors are ignored? No. To avoid the program crashing abruptly? Yes. The answer is to avoid the program crashing abruptly. To make program run faster. So exceptions are not connected with running the program faster. It is also not connected with to execute the program without error. It is whenever error is identified, then what is the kind of error? So identify that error and give some message to the user. This is the kind of error. Let the user or the programmer identify that error and rectify. Then only the program will complete and give the result. So the correct answer is to avoid the program crashing abruptly. So the explanation is exception handling prevents sudden program termination or cancellation and allows graceful error management. Another question is what is primary purpose of assert statement in Python? Primary purpose of assert statement. Remember, there is a write statement, there is a assert statement. It is used to manually create an exception. So here they were asking for the assert statement to catch exception during the program execution. Assert statement is used? No. To define functions for debugging, it is not at all connected with exceptions. To test if a condition is true, yes. The assert statement syntax is condition, if false, exception, if condition is true, then the statement below it will be executed. So to execute the statement beneath it or to raise an exception, a condition will be tested in assert statement. So the answer is to test if a condition is true. If the condition is false, it will raise an exception. That means it catches the exception. So explanation is assert test a condition if false raises assertion error. If it is true, it will continue executing the program. That means there is no error. Then fill in the blanks question is like this. The dash statement in Python is used to test an expression in the program code. Now you need not recall what should be filled in these boxes because answers will be given. You have to pick the correct answer for this. And the second question is the process of creating an exception object and handling it over to the runtime system is called dash an exception. Another question, dash disrupts the normal execution of a program. Now there are three options here, assert, throwing, and exception. You have to choose the correct one, and the correct answer is already posted. The dash statement in Python is used to test an expression in the program code. Which one? The assert statement, throwing, or exception? The assert statement is the correct answer for the first one. The process of creating an exception object and handling it over to the runtime system is called dash an exception. It is called throwing an exception. The dash disrupts normal execution of a program. Exceptions disrupts the normal execution of a program because it take care of the identified errors. And these are the two questions appeared in your preparatory examination. Syntax error, also known as parsing error. If an error has been detected in the dash block, that is the try block, and then the dash block will be executed to handle the error, that is except block. Okay, so the first one answer is parsing error, the second one is try except. Now let us observe how the 3 mark questions comes from this particular chapter. What is the need for exception handling? You have to answer in minimum 3 points, but always I suggest you to write needs. 4 needs. What is the purpose of assert statement? You have to explain what is the purpose of assert statement. Then write its syntax and give an example. So the purpose of assert statement will give you 1 mark. Answering write its syntax will give you 1 mark. Give an example gives 1 mark. Totally 3 marks question it is. Define the following. Please study carefully all the answers for these questions. What is exception handler? What is the meaning of throwing an exception? What is the meaning of catching an exception? Please study the answer for this. The question will appear like this. The next questions are from the preparatory question paper. Define what is import error, what is name error, what is overflow error. And the second question is explain any 3 built-in exceptions in Python. If the question comes in explain any 3 built-in exceptions, please select any 3 simple, very clearly understood built-in exception. Again, I am telling in the place of 3 built-in exceptions, please try to write 4 built-in exceptions. Of course, in this question that is define import error, name error, overflow error, there is no scope for answering for the extra exception. You have to limit your answer within these three specified exceptions. But what we can do is, whenever you are explaining import error, what is import error, give example. What is name error, give example. What is workflow error, give example. In that way you have to answer, then you will get complete 3 marks.